not. It didn't show up on the YouTube yet.
Hello, people. I am Hello Sailor Joe, and this is the pedal.
YouTube, I don't think.
It's saying live my end. There might be a slight delay.
It says live on my end too. Let me refresh this page. We want to make sure.
Is anyone? Well, I can see Jay's in the comments already. If anyone's watching, can you hear us so far? I'm going to say that we're live.
Hi. We're here.
There you go. Hello, people. Welcome to the Pedal Dive podcast. I am Hello Sailor Joe. This is episode number 2. Episode number 1 was even worse than this one. It's an absolute train wreck. And my co-host today is going to be
John Mulholland, SpaceWolf of Mulholland Musical Devices.
There you go. And today we're going to be taking a deep dive into that classic circuit. It is, of course, the Fuzz Face. Probably my favourite fuzz. I'm sure you feel the same, John. After our discussions, you've got a lot of information about this circuit. And to me, I think this is where everyone should start when they're starting to get into fuzz. I know people recommend the Tone Bender, but I really believe that the Fuzz Face is the circuit to get into if you're building. If you can nail this one, everything else seems to come easier after that, yeah.
It's so true. It's one of those pedals that you want to throw against the wall sometimes when you're first learning how to work with it.
Especially by them transistors.
Not kidding.
I actually started with, I don't know why, but I started with a ZVEX. What's the ZVEX one that they do with the 5 knobs? It's a Fuzz Face,
or not Fuzz Board, Fuzz Factory.
Fuzz Factory. Oh my! Yeah. Why on earth would you start with the Fuzz Factory? So I built it. In fact, I think there's a guy in Scotland who owns one of the early ones. It was called something like the Dragon, or I don't know, but it was like in 2008. And I built it, and I turned it on, and it made like the worst farting noise, and I was like, it doesn't work. Clearly it did work.
Yep.
Yeah, oh man. But yeah, so basically in this episode, we're going to have a look at basically the circuit. We're going to walk through it, component by component, talk about what each one does, and our views on them components. Then we're going to talk about basically what components people should seek out, and also what modifications. Because I mean, John has got like a ton of modifications that you can do to the circuit, and they're all valid. So and that's where the key is. No one wants to copy a Fuzz Face step by step and do it exactly like Arbiter did back in the day. I mean, you want to make it your own, don't you?
Oh yeah. I mean, granted, like that classic sound. I mean, music we all love. It's there. It's like I keep one around just for that purpose.
Just Hendrix on his own. That's 2 different Fuzz Faces you need just to get all of his tones in one go.
Oh, I know. It's
insane.
Yeah, it is insane. Yeah.
Okay, so John, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your favourite Fuzz Face tone? The one recorded Fuzz Face tone. If you had to pin it down, I really hope you don't pick my one, because I've got one that stands out more than anything. Really affected me when I was getting into guitar. Do you want me to go first?
Well, I would have to say it's the Hendrix tone on Little Wing.
Oh man, that's good.
That shows the value of being able to roll off the volume and make that chiming, like beautiful singing angel sound. And then when he rolls the volume up and you hear that swell into the woo, I mean, it's just like that's
brutal.
I mean, I just got goosebumps like reliving it in my head. So that's the tone. That's it, hands down. That's the first one that comes to mind, and it gives me the goosebump test. So
hell of a song. Yeah, mine's Hendrix again. Funnily enough, shocker, and it's definitely the Star Spangled Banner. He's doing the dive bombs. It sounds like bombs are going off. That was unreal. And it's almost like he's not playing the guitar. It's like an extension of himself.
He's playing the whole circuit. It's his amp, it's his guitar, his proximity, and probably everything that was tucked under his headband at the same time too.
I caught up with him eventually.
He was definitely not one of. He was definitely not one to shy away from the Psychonaut adventure. So,
a US veteran. Like, how can you argue with that? I know he got a lot of stick. Yeah, he got a lot of stick for playing that. The Star Spangled Banner, didn't he? Even, I think it was who interviewed him. Like, he was a big talk show host and said, a lot of people say bad things, and he's like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. He couldn't comprehend it because in his head he was so patriotic himself.
He was. I mean, he was like, still, politically active, and he thought that it was everybody's duty to, like, stand up for what was right. So I mean, that's kind of the same situation we're in now. So the more the more they're same.
What's funny is you see Hendrix as yours, but we feel like we adopted them over here. It's like Hendrix is English music, British. What are you talking about?
Well, what's so funny is nobody wanted anything to do with Hendrix until he came from England. They introduced him as the next big thing from England because everybody over here wanted English bands. We were like looking for the Stones, we were looking for the Beatles, we were looking for the Animals, we were looking for I mean, come on.
Well, didn't he play for Little Richard for a bit?
He played for a lot of people.
I'm sure he was too extravagant. He got booted out for up showmanship in him or whatever, which wouldn't surprise me.
Well, he was really like humble when he was a sideman, from what I heard. And I have a friend who met him when he was a teenager. My friend Robert Ross, he won the Best New York Blues Guitarist Award for 2 different occasions. And when he was 17, he went to a jam session. And in the room was B.B. King, Elvin Bishop, like all these people, like, and he was this hot prodigy.
Come on.
And they introduced him, and he like got in there and like plugged into Elvin Bishop's amp through B.B. King's Lucille and shredded and like showed off. And this young guy named Jimmy James was playing bass on the jam, and it was Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy James was his given name, and he said if he'd have known, like, he would have just, stayed in the room and listened. But he was a cocky 17-year-old kid, and he just like went and showed off and said, "See, I'm better than all of y'all," and left.
I think Clapton had a similar experience where Jimmy got up on stage with him and he didn't quite know what he's letting himself in for, I can imagine that. Well, I also heard, bringing it back to the Fuzz Face, that he chose the Fuzz Face because it was the cheapest. It was like, was it 30.39 guineas or something like that? So it was like 10 guineas or 10.1 cheaper than the next best thing. So he chose it because it was cheap.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
And then the stories abound of how many they had to go through to find the ones that worked.
Yeah. And I wonder if that was just a bias. Different transistors, they were biased at a different point.
They were throwing any transistor that they could find. And with germanium being so like unstable, like, and with leakage being an issue, like they didn't understand all of that at the time. And so some of them sounded amazing, like, and in some cases, like you'd get one where the transistors were installed in the wrong order for the bias to work properly.
I mean, the ones they were using back in the day, they were the cheapest ones they could find because it was a guitar pedal. It wasn't a hospital equipment or a hospital equipment. That's terrible, England. It wasn't hospital equipment or.
It was the rejects.
Exactly. And I mean,
didn't meet the
NKT 275. You could probably pick them up for nothing. They were probably the bottom of the line or
right over here.
I've got one, and a 275p, and it's going in a. I've never seen one before. It's going in a huge pedal.
Oh, these are 404s. You can find 404s everywhere too. They're ubiquitous.
Mental.
Yep.
I mean, I'd say, have you ever tried the 678s going off piece here? But the NKT 678s, honestly, I bought a bag of them off eBay, thinking I was going to get maybe one, and I had like every single one tested good, and I've never been able to find them since. Brilliant.
Yeah. I just find whatever works whenever I can find it. I scrounge throughout like my journeys. I look through antique stores. I'll look through ham radio shows, those kind of things. Like, it's amazing what you'll find in the States. Like, there are guys that have been hoarding this stuff since the 1930s.
Absolutely. I mean, well, I watch a lot of who's the Amtech guy on? God, D-Lab Electronics, is it? He does a lot of amplifier repairs. Love his channel, and he goes to the whole ham radio and ex-military as well. Funnily enough, his son about was ex-military. I want to get stuck into old components, but anyway, right. I'd like to start with. Let's get our picture up of our Oh man. Now, if anyone's wondering, I took this circuit from electrosmash.com, and that's because they do a real comprehensive sort of talk through of the Fuzz Face. And if you're not really into electronics, it's a bit full on, because they've got like, clipping and all sorts of voltage ranges and stuff that you don't really need to know. And so just looking at this, I'd like us to start at the input. So if I use my cursor over here, so the input, we're going to go in through our input jack. And it is, of course, the original ones were positive ground. So the germanium ones were positive ground, which is one thing to know. But this first cap here, C1, 2.2 UF, if you were building one of these, what sort of capacitor would you be looking for that? Would you go electrolytic or?
Oh yeah, I would definitely go with an electrolytic. Yeah. But also, it's fun to experiment. You can do a lot at that stage. You can go with a lot lower value. You can go down to even a 0.1 electrolytic if you want to. I find that electrolytic, just the fact that it acts a little bit like a charge pump, it helps push everything through. But when you put,
I've never thought of it like that, to be fair.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I've never used an electrolytic in one of my own builds in this position, so I've never thought of it as a charge. I know that's how they work. I equate anything to HPA or water systems, because I'm a mechanical engineer. So I see like an electrolytic cap as like a header tank or a compressed tank,
Oh yeah. Well, this circuit too, what's really cool about it is once you plug into that input, your guitar is part of the circuit. Like, you are part of the circuit at that point. So that capacitor, like that, is going to color everything, as far as what you're going to be able to get for your rollback tones, what kind of tone you're going to be manipulating in your transistors. And, you can do a lot. I mean, a lot of people put a 10 microfarad electrolytic in there. Like the very first Fuzz Face pedal that I ever bought, the first pedal, I happen to have it right here. This is the very first effect pedal that I ever bought. And it is it is a Fuzz Face. It was made by Todd Kelly, who founded Endangered Audio and then Moxtronics. And he uses a 10 microfarad electrolytic capacitor on the input stage. Yes. 10 microfarad. Yeah.
So I've never, when I bought my first one, believe it or not, my first one was an analog man, NKT 275, the red dot ones.
Those are beautiful.
Mate, let me tell you, I sold that for less than what you can get a tube screamer for now. It's ridiculous. It's like 2008, 2009. Yeah, and I remember opening it up and having a look and seeing a 1 UF input cap, and I was like, well, that's not what it says online. And it baffled me. But I think what he was trying to take a bit of bass out on the input was like give it a little less woof maybe. Yeah. So also, as you can see on this drawing, handily, it's got like the input stage. So all of this area in blue here is like, this is terrible listening for anyone who's listening to the podcast post live stream. Fantastic. But basically, if anyone wants this drawing, I can direct you to it. Or if you get in touch, I'll send you any information I've got. But then we go to our Q1, which is this is the first gain stage. And if you ever audio probe after this one, it's not really a lot of gain post this stage, is it? It's overdrivey sound. It's not really fuzz.
It's
how do you approach this one?
That transistor is one that it's got a lot of potential. I mean, you can vary the voltage with a resistor at the junction. Let's see. I'll have to pull up this one. Yeah, so you can put in a bias control on the input, like even before it hits your input capacitor. Like, I've seen like a 50K linear pot put there before. So at
we're getting a question in from the chat, and I love a good question. So David De Los Santos, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm terrible at butchering names. Apologies. He He's saying that he can't hang around. He's going to watch it later. He's working on a Marshall Super Fuzz. Come on. Nails to dial them transistors in, my friend. Good luck with that. I've messed many of them up. And also, what's your favourite transistor? Well, I mentioned before NKT 678. I've got one of them left in the world. They're nice. I also really like I've got these General like little black transistors that come out of an old organ. Again, I bought a bag of like 100 of them, and they all test amazing. That's another one. And NPM wise, I like the CV7112, which is a military spec OC140. How about yourself?
Myself, that is one of those questions that my standard answer is it depends on the circuit, because every circuit benefits from the different transistor types. That's why I have a collection surrounding me right now. I mean,
that's a good answer. It really does depend.
If I'm building, you know, the Super Fuzz clone that he's building, I would probably have a different approach as to what I'm building on the Fuzz Face. And then there's variations of the Fuzz Face that I build that I'll use totally different transistors that I like for that application, because, you know, the way that they handle like their slew ratio, all that kind of thing. Like, you know, because I'm building the circuit to respond in a certain way, and a transistor that can't handle those kind of shifts, you know, you get sounds that you don't want in the circuit. And then, you know, so it really just depends. But some of my favorite ones I like to look out for in the NPN silicon world are like the 39 series and the 35 series, and then also the 30 series, like these 2N 3053s. These are national semiconductors. They work great in NPN silicon fuzz faces. Also, they work really good in hybrid circuits, where I'll take an NPN germanium and then use that as my Q1, the silicon, and then I'll use my germanium as my Q2, because it's
I'm sat here with one right in front of me. Although this is so that's one of my favorite General Elect. That's the ones I was on about. But I've also got a Texas Instruments. But I find them really hard to bias. I mean, we'll talk about that in a mod section for sure. But I think you have to bend the rules a little bit. There's me butchering me. You have to bend the rules a little bit on the circuit, as in like be willing to add in a little bit more to bias it. I think if sometimes if you've got like a really high HFE silicon and a low HFE germanium, you do run into a few problems.
And there's some workarounds for that. You know, you can add some different ways to step things down so that the two can meet, and that's what you're talking. It becomes a more complicated bias array, and it's one of the things that makes this circuit so magic is you start understanding things and how to make things work on a level that you really wouldn't get if, say, you're building something with an IC in it. Like, say you're going to build a tube screamer. I mean,
consistency.
You can't really get inside of that IC and change too much. It's set. You can only.
I'm going to break the internet now and just say a TLO72 is probably the best IC you're going to get, and it sounds amazing. I don't care what anyone says. I've tried a million of them. Oh, man. They sound so good. And if they cost 5 times as much, even more, if they cost £20 an IC, people would be chasing them down. I've said it now. Everyone's going to hate me, but that's a fact.
You know, there's like so little audible difference between the 4558 and the 072, and in some cases the 072 outperforms the 4558. So it depends on the circuit. Again, it's like, you know, it's only when you like use it and attenuate it in certain ways that those differences really come out. Like it's the same thing with the rat debate with the 308. You know,
at least that's got hard clipping, so you know it does actually play more of a role. Whereas the tube screamer is just soft clipping. I actually want to do a tube screamer episode. So I've got a friend who runs JSA effect pedals, and he is like the ninja on tube screamers. Like, we dissected a version that was for Stevie Ray. Well, he dissected the version, and I kind of, you know, held his pocket as he went along. But he's brilliant, and he put me onto these diodes and stuff. But I want to save all that for another episode because I haven't asked him yet. So if he's watching later on, please hit me up for that. But yeah, okay. So what we're saying is you need to really try different transistors in your circuit. And do you breadboard before you build, if you're building one of these?
Well, I'm getting ready to answer that question with the solution that I found, because once I've established a circuit that I like to work with, I like to build what I would consider to be a breadboard in a box.
Oh, that's a good show.
And I've got enclosures that I've been using for over a decade now, just to try out different circuits, because you really don't know how things are going to respond until they're inside the enclosure. It takes all these proximity guessing games out of the equation. Like when you're on a breadboard, your components are kind of spread out, and so you don't have the ability to really know if, say,
it's going to be noisy.
Yeah, say you get this capacitor too close to this transistor, or this resistor, is like.
But this is another thing. Drawing on to the discussions I've had this week over using old components and not using them. Proximity to each other really does matter. It really, really does. So coming from a warship where there's 440 volts AC all over the ship and 750 volts DC for propulsion in a lot of places. So where I'm building and where I'm playing is surrounded by electronic magnetic fields everywhere. And if it was like the wall of death for any pedal that I built at sea, because if it was good and it made a little bit of noise and not much noise, I knew it was going to be quiet the second they got it off the ship. So it really does matter. And I imagine if you go to different gigs and venues, probably not so much in the UK, but maybe out in the States where the air isn't as good or the ground isn't as good, it's got to make a difference. It has to.
I've seen everything under the sun as a working musician. Like some of the sketchiest plugins where it's like one extension cord with a whole bunch of daisy chained multi-outlet power strips, and you're running thousands of watts of power off of this one outlet. With
every pedal that every amp,
probably has a 15 amp breaker.
Class.
Yeah.
Oh, mate.
So to answer that question, here's what I do for breadboarding.
Come on. So you can just plug them in and.
Yeah, and they're all in sockets. I don't know if.
Yeah.
I can't really see.
That's sensible.
And so then I can change any component. I can tap in. I can jumper, leave components out. And if I discover a circuit that I want to modify, I'll just make another board and put it in. Like this has given birth to so many things. Right now, this is not a Fuzz Face. This is actually based off of a Fuzz Face. This is called the Boot Face, and this is one that we'll get into a little bit later when we start talking about Q2. But that's
cool.
I have it out. Yeah. So it's something that you can do really cool with the second transistor in the circuit.
And so right now we're on Q1. What are you aiming for if you're building this bias wise? So do you aim for the specific voltage, or do you do it by ear, or how do you go biasing?
Because it's the way that I work, and also just the thing that I have as far as I'm mildly synesthetic. So I don't know if people know what synesthesia is. It's a condition where your senses are kind of scrambled, where you'll hear colors, you'll taste sounds, you'll smell pictures, things like that.
Who's the guy? Who's the heavy metal guy? Devin Townsend, is it?
Maybe.
He's heavily. So he's heavily like that, and he's also got a son who's just got into music as well, who's also the same. They see notes as colours as opposed to.
Yeah, and so
that makes sense.
I found that I can pick out nuances when I'm tuning a circuit by using that ability. It's like I'm the multimeter instead of and I have a much higher sensitivity rate than anything we've devised as sentient beings so far. So it's just me. Cool. I can't recommend that for everyone, but I do recommend learning to tune it by ear, but also test your meter too.
I throw it out to a lot of my customers because sometimes most of my pedals go to the US. I mean, they just do. I'm not sure why. Over your side of the pond, people seem to resonate with them better. I don't know.
We have this really big thing here. My nephew, he was such an Anglophile. Just a few years ago, he was speaking with an English accent. He was wearing English driving caps. He was like a Manchester United fan.
I won't hold that against them, but
I know. Oh,
but I completely get it. So all my pedals go over there, and sometimes the temperature difference, or they get knocked in transit. Or I don't know if your customs over your end think that I'm trying to smuggle something nefarious over there, and they give it a mess or whatever. But so I have to explain to customers to have it plugged in and give it a tweak, to do it by ear themselves. And you can hear the note. It's so weird. You can hear the note kind of bloom and just come into. It's like tuning a note. You know it's in tune because you kind of get that warm, and then it hits where you need it to be. It does the same thing. But I like to start off with a point, like for germanium, 0.7 volts, and then go from there by ear. And then silicon, 1.3 volts again with silicon and go by ear. But
and again,
yeah, absolutely. And
I've discovered with the testing of different transistor pairings, some you have a different voltage point that you want to start off with. Like there's a pair, right here, a matched pair that worked really good in the one knob fuzz circuit, which is basically the Fuzz Face circuit with just different R values and C values.
So kind of like the damn meathead, isn't that like a silicon one knob fuzz?
Yeah.
Differential audio manifestations. Yeah. So, I've tried building so many of them; it just never works for me.
Here's a set that, in the bias range that I had to adjust it, it performed outside of the range, so it'll handle lower and higher voltages. So that's the thing. That's what's beautiful about like having the ability to plug things in and out. What I do here is I'll take these variable.
Resistance. And I think they're the same ones I've got.
Yeah.
The skeleton ones.
I'll solder legs onto them. I'll connect pin 2 to either pin 1 or pin 3, and solder legs on 1 and 3, and then I can plug them into my sockets and tweak it. And if I need a different value, if I find I've reached my range and I need to go higher, I can just get another one and plug it in. Those are invaluable.
I say this all the time. When you're clipping your capacitors and resistor legs, never throw them clippings away. I'm like, I know it's a little bit like, you can afford to buy some wire, but I never do. I keep them little clippings and I use them for exactly that. And I always think, what would Leo Fender do? He'd save everything and use everything again. And I'm like, well, that guy's a legend, so I'm doing it.
I think my dad was like cloned from the same stock as Leo Fender. That's the reason why I have all this stuff. I grew up surrounded by old radios and televisions. I've got eventually you're gonna see the layer that I have. I'm in the process of selling my house where I used to live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm moving onto 36 acres that I've had since 2000. I've had it for 24 years.
Oh, wow.
That's where I'm going to build my ultimate shop and compound, and so that'll be the place where, when you can come across the pond, we can sit by the fire, have a couple of beers, and talk about transistors and diodes and ICs till the sun goes down and comes back up.
Sounds class.
Yes, sir. But anyway, I want to take a moment and say thank you to David De Los Santos. He said, "This is great stuff. Hey, man, glad you enjoy it." And also,
cheers, mate.
Hello to the Death Dealer. He's given us some thumbs up. Keep it up. And then
cheers, mate.
Also a question from Glenn Nunn.
That's actually my father-in-law. Cheers, Glenn. He comes to the guitar shows with me, and he's getting real interested in this side of things. He's also getting a bigger guitar collection at the minute. I hope his wife's not here.
I got to size mine up too. Mate. Is it worth buying old valve, non-working radios, etc., from secondhand shops just for a chance of getting good components from them if they're reasonably priced? My answer is yes, always.
100%. I'll give people a little tip now. If you're in the UK and you can get online and buy a Roberts 200 radio, they come in an amazing box that you could repurpose with a Celestian speaker. Believe it or not, maybe only a 3-inch one. Less than that, maybe. And there's a guy, Mike Rivers, who most of you don't know if you follow me on Instagram. He builds amplifiers out of them, like the most amazing amplifiers out of them. But if you strip them, you can make a fuzz face. It's like 5 germanium transistors ranging from Mulholland OC81Ds and 81s. It's a gold mine, treasure trove. And the knobs on them are fantastic as well. They're 100% always.
I'm glad you said that, because here's something that I did just as an exercise. I posted this on my YouTube channel, which is not nearly, as professional yet. I'm still growing it, but I built a working distortion pedal off of this circuit board. And this circuit board is just the camera flash mechanism from a 35 millimeter cheap camera from the 80s. It had all through mount components. And what prompted it was it had a single transistor, had multiple diodes, and it had a few resistors. And I said, I could build an Electra out of that. And so
you built an Electra distortion.
I built
That's great timing.
Distortion. Yeah, here's one of my prototyping boards. As you can see, it's socketed.
Josh Scott from JHS is literally just doing a whole build series on the Electra. You couldn't have hit that at a better time.
It's so serendipitous, I know. And it works great. It's got a 0.1 microfarad electrolytic input cap. The transistor is a D series, one of the emitter collector base pinouts. And then it had a 0.022 Mylar cap.
There you go.
That's my output cap. And then it had a 1 meg. Yeah, it had a 1 meg resistor. It had a 1K resistor. So those fit in where the 680 and the 2.2, and hooked it up, and I was amazed.
It's so much stuff on.
This never happens. Anytime I build something, the first prototype I build, it's like the first time I've ever built a circuit. I plug it in, I get nothing. I always expect nothing but bypass. The first time I go back and check my traces, make sure I didn't install anything backwards, all that. I plugged this in and I stomped on the switch, filming, and it worked. And I was like,
wow.
Whoa. And now I've got the Electra circuit prototyped. It's got different clipping options. It's got I've added a tone control. I've also added a gain.
I feel like we need to do an episode on the Electra.
We're gonna be going into the Electra after the Fuzz Face. So that's the segue for that. So anyway.
Okay, so far we're half an hour in and we've done the input.
Yeah, I know. I told you.
This is how it's going to go.
I told you, man.
So which bit? Feedback, or do you want to go output stage next? I'm a gentleman. I'll let you decide.
Man, let's see. Let's go with that feedback network, because it's closely connected to how a lot of other things work, and it's something that I do a modification.
It's important
every time. Yeah,
it's important
every time.
So what's happening in this stage is the R4, which is right in the center here. It's a 100k resistor. That's allowing some of the signal to go back, or the current really, to go back to Q1, and it actually gets rid of a bit of blocking distortion, and it lowers the gain. And it's essential, because if you don't put some back, it's not like an amplifier where you get this cool overdriven yams cooking sort of sound. It just sounds messy and it's not a good sound.
Yeah, it's just because of the nature of the voltage feedback circuit that this is designed on.
Yeah.
So.
And C2 there, which is a 20 UF on this, that's actually shunting them signals to ground. So when you're turning up your, what I would call fuzz, but I think it's labelled up as an intensity on this one. It's not. It's labelled up on fuzz as this one. Yeah. So the fuzz control, what you're doing is showing more of the signal to this capacitor, and it's shunting that to ground.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's where I take that variable resistor out completely, and I just put in a 1K resistor and connect one to that, shoot it to ground.
You turn it up full. There's no point in not turning it up full.
Yeah. I basically do this. I don't know if you can see this on the circuit board.
Yeah, we can see it.
This is like my Fuzz Face circuit from 2013, but I've been using it for all the different variations of the circuit that I build from then on. And like you can actually see, this one was one that I made
Oh,
in
you traced it out.
2013. I traced it in 2013 and burned it in 2013, and it was part of a. This was part of a circuit board for a dual pedal I called the Double Disaster. That was half Fuzz Face and then half LM386 overdrive, like a really dirt
Cool.
box kind of op amp overdrive. But anyway, I wanted to real quickly mention something because we're starting to get into some things that I think people would benefit from this article. And when we were off air earlier, Joe mentioned he'd never heard of this article before, and this is the go-to for anybody that is interested in building a Fuzz Face, or even just curious like how this thing works. Even if you're never going to build one, you just want to know why this pedal sounds so good. RG Keen posted an article on the GFX website back in 1998 called "The Technology of the Fuzz Face." I got a printed copy of it right here. It lays out the circuit, and it goes through in great detail everything that we're talking about, why it does what it does, how it kind of was, a happy accident more than anything.
Yeah.
And
so how did you find that circuit? Did you just stumble on it, or?
Well, when I first went down the rabbit hole, that pedal, the Transtone that I showed you, this pedal, when I first bought that, I needed an overdrive, and I was like, well, I've got electronics experience. I can build one myself. And so I went to all the different websites that were available, like Beavis Audio Research. Let's see, there were...
AMZ, was it?
I don't know if AMZ was one of them at the time. This was like 2006, maybe 2007. So whoever was out there, but there were these forums that Mark Hammer, JD Sleep, got to go through the names, Jack Orman, all these legends, of the DIY Stompbox community. Were giving out information, and we were like discussing things and talking about stuff. So that was where I got the LM386 overdrive idea, the dirt box. The Grace overdrive and the Big Daddy were two that were based off of these LM386 amplifiers that I also built a lot of those. I basically fell in love with that really nasty, gnarly LM386 sound that you could get on a recording. It was one of my favorite recording amps in the studio because it makes it sound like you're blowing. Makes it sound like you're blowing.
Here's a good question that we can stick on the screen. Look at that! I've just learned something. I know how to put them on the screen now. So Justin Drawbridge, you also build fantastic fuzzers, by the way. I've got one of his Wedge Mark 1.5s. Brilliant pedal. How much do you both think that the feedback resistor contributes to the nature of the cleanup? It is the cleanup. The guitar's volume point, that's what he means by cleanup. Compared to something, say, like the Zonk 2 that doesn't have one. Let me tell you, mate, that resistor is the reason why the guitar cleans up. If I'm building a pedal for someone who wants that cleanup, I'll put a lower value in. I'll aim for maybe a 91k on average and drop it down to about 80 odd if they really have to clean up. But also, if someone wants something really, as you Americans would say, something gnarly, and they want, a punch in the face like Fuzz, I'll increase that resistor as well, or maybe put it on a switch. I mean, the sky's your limit on that one, I think.
That's a perfect segue into another one of my favorite modifications. You'll notice that this Fuzz Lab that I've been designing that a boot face in has 3 knobs on it. One of them is, the knob that I use to bias Q2. That's one of my favorite modifications, where I replaced the 800 and some ohm resistor with the, that classic one. But the second one is a knob that does the same thing for that 100K resistor, that feedback resistor. And so then I can dial it back, or I can dial it up, and you can get like all kinds of crazy cleanup. And by using it, it's like you have a forward and a reverse bias going in the situation there. And
have you ever changed that out for other components? So I've used 2 diodes and a capacitor before now.
I've seen that done. It's an experiment I haven't done yet. No, but that's
so I built one, and it went. It sold straight away. I didn't have a chance to test it because I don't breadboard. I don't plan things out. I sort of shoot from the hip. I like go, look at this
the
component.
same,
I build it all. I just can't help myself.
A lot of ideas I get where I don't even like think about putting the sockets in. I'll grab something like this. I'll grab components and I just start looking at the schematic and wiring points.
Just put them in. Yeah.
Then that's why a lot of times when I plug it in the first time and hit the stomp switch, okay, what did I do wrong?
Let's move on. We get the audio profile. Yeah, but that feedback resistor is a great place to experiment. If you put sockets in there, and you can even do like a 6-way rotary switch and have, you could have some with feedback diodes, you could have some with high value, low value resistors, some with a bypass cap. You could have, there's an article and I forget who wrote it. I will be able to find it if anyone wants it. Please just get hold of me on social media. But it's called The Many Faces of Fuzz. And it's basically loads of drawings about the Fuzz Face, right?
Yeah.
And that's I must have read that article like 100 times in my bunk on board. Nothing, as you're falling asleep, there's not a lot to do. I just start reading articles or what have you. That's why phones are brilliant. But I just sit there reading over that and I was like, wow, you could put MOSFETs in this feedback position.
It is such It's such a beautiful place to like learn how things can grow off of it. I like to think of this as, also a building block. Some of the pedals that I build, this is not, a standalone component. It's part of the circuit. It goes into a bigger circuit as my hard clipping, like I dial this in, and there's an op amp. I'm actually experimenting with CMOS a lot, the 4049 hex inverter op amp.
I hate
linear.
them things. They're so hard to use.
Oh, dude, I've got to make you into a convert. I will show you the light.
How'd you get it on a tag board?
Oh man, easy.
Maybe we need to talk. I do it. I do a TS808 and I do it off board because I plug that in and run the wires. Like I just can't.
I'll introduce you to like the wire wrap sockets that they made during the wire wrap craze. And that's
cool.
The way to do it.
That sounds good.
They're IC sockets that have super long legs. I don't have one handy here, but I'm like legs that are like really nice gold plated long legs that you can bend.
That sound good. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the way you can do it the way you're talking about. But I'm one of those old school bodgers. Like I will, I will find a way, man. I will find a way.
So over here in the UK, we have a program or had a program called Scrappy Challenge. They like go to a scrapyard and he build like a car. That's me.
Junkyard Wars. There
you go.
Relabeled it Junkyard Wars and broadcast it on the Discovery Channel in the US. It was great.
So that's me. I will go into my storeroom, which is my spare room in my house at the minute. I'm currently moving, so I'm moving like probably 200 meters down the road, if that, to a new house that's got a garage that's getting turned into a workshop. So I'll have a place for all of this stuff. But at the minute, I'm in my spare room, which is like boxes on top of me. It's a nightmare. But I'm like that in there. So I'll be digging through and finding, quick shout out to the Basement Detroit Ampworks. Them guys send me tons of components. So they service their amplifiers and send me a box of capacitors. Or Mike at Secret Effects, Secret Electric. He just sent me like a box. I can't even describe how big this box was. It's ridiculous. It had Bumblebee caps in, it had Black Beauty caps in, it had them Sagamo caps that come in the Dan Electro amps. He just sent me a whole box of them. He's like, they're too big for me to use. Like, what? I'm not finding trouble getting through them,
twist my arm.
Yeah. He said, all you have to do is pay the shippers. Like, mate, I've got to give you some. I think I sent him a pedal in yet. Like, what? And this is the community that we're in,
I know.
It's great.
I just had a really good interaction. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Ross at stompboxparts.com.
Cool.
In my journeys, I came across a whole bunch of LM308s that I had acquired at a ham radio show, and they were in a bag of op amps that I bought for next to nothing. And 308s originals are going for ridiculous money. And he is a big fan of the Rat, and so I said, "Hey man, I've got these 308s. I need a bunch of components that you sell on your website. You want to do a trade?" So we do a partial trade, partial cash. So I just got a whole box of like really cool components, and I still have a bunch of 308s to build Rats if I want to. But like that's the community we're in. Like we all look out for each
Love it.
other, and yeah. So
So actually,
really,
my father-in-law Glenn, he really couldn't understand it for ages. I'd be like giving people my circuit to say, there you go, try this, or sending him components out, and he's like, you're helping your competitors. That's not how you do business, because he runs his own business. I was like, mate, this is art. It's not business.
Yeah,
no, this is about guitar. This isn't that sort of thing. And even now he's coming around to it. He's like, oh wow, I see what you mean now. But that's what I love about this industry.
Different reality. You're not looking at each other as competition. You're looking at each other as peers, and like you're all looking for like that ultimate tone. And as soon as somebody finds something new, they want to share it. I mean, it's
exactly
classic.
that.
Yeah, it's classic. Anybody that's sitting at home thinking they've discovered like fire and the wheels themselves, they're sadly mistaken. They're so sadly.
I'll refer you to Leo Fender taking it out of a handbook, an RCA handbook for every amplifier he ever built.
Well, that's what
there or thereabouts.
The circuit that we're discussing right now, it came right out of a handbook, right out of an engineering handbook. I've got one of the old handbooks myself that they would release, like electronics designs that the Society of Electrical Engineers came up with for the components that were available for commercial use for people to design appliances and things. And so Leo Fender, and you know, in the case of the designer of the original Fuzz Face circuit, I mean, there's some interesting history there. We're not really into the history; we're more into the circuit. So, but
exactly.
You know, it came right out of the handbook.
Speaking of which, 1K fuzz pot. Now I've seen some people go to 2K because the Tone Bender Mark 1.5 does, and here's another example actually. Tone Bender Mark 1.5 comes out thereabouts the same time as a Fuzz Face. There is no way that they both had the same circuit layout with different values in by accident.
That's one of those things about the origin story I was referring to. That John goes into a lot about that. There's so many people who have done such deep dives into the history and like who did what and who had what when, who was using this. Like, I mean, I'm glad there's people out there like that, because I eat that stuff up. I'm like, you know, if I had spare time, if I had the spare time, I'd be doing the same thing.
Of course. So yeah, with the value of that pot, what's your ideal value? Do you stick to the 1K? I mean, personally, I stick to the 1K. I never really.
I mean, I actually have like completely done away with that pot entirely. Like that.
Of course, you just had it.
I just and I stick with
I refer you to this one, so with this one.
Now, so for the variable
this is
that one.
This is the volume pot, but the fuzz pot's hardwired. Only because I couldn't fit it on, because I made the volume pot a Fuzz Face.
That's great. I love that.
You can't fit a round Fuzz Face on your board, but now you can.
Oh yes, you can. Again, where there's a will. So now.
Yeah. So. That's it. With that value, I just keep it 1K. I find that. I mean, I use the old Phillips Ace method of setting up your Fuzz Face. Turn everyone up to full, your guitar up to full, and then back off the fuzz pot until the sound of frying bacon goes away. It's like a hair done. I mean, and then everything's on the guitar volume.
After that,
that's the way it's done.
Everybody that I built Fuzz Faces for, like I built a lot of boutique ones for people over the years, and everybody used it. They cranked the fuzz control wide open and rolled back the volume. And I was like, oh,
of course,
it's a useless control. I could put something else in that hole.
Exactly.
So,
and Josh, the aforementioned Josh does a great video on Fuzz Face mods. Hopefully we can elaborate on some of them and do some different mods. I mean, I know you've modded this thing to death. But Q2, Q2. So are you? What's your preference for Q2?
So my preference for Q2, I want to go with, if I'm wanting like, you know, the kind of classic fuzz tone, I'm looking for a value. My HFE, I want it to be somewhere like around 40 less than what Q1 is.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
I'm going for like the 120 in Q1, 80 in Q2, that kind of ratio.
Yeah.
Or like maybe 140 something in Q1 and then like 100 in Q2. And I've experimented.
So
I've gone further and I've gone closer.
yeah, yeah,
And you get different characteristics of fuzz the further you separate or the closer you get together with your HAV.
absolutely.
And when you get really close, when you have a perfectly matched pair, it makes a really smooth sounding fuzz. You don't get the crackle and the hiss and the snarl.
Yeah.
It's like almost an overdrive.
There's a balancing act to be had on the plate. So I've just built one for Todd, who runs the Guitar Knobs podcast. I built one for him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello, Todd. Shout out to Todd.
What a legend. Like I think 2018, they put me on the show and sort of introduced me to the world, and it took off from them. So I so much time for Todd. Like, but he's big into like Britpop. So I did him a Union Jack out of nitrocellulose lacquer with like, Fiesta Red and all that jazz. But with the transistors, I knew that he would like something that wasn't as snarly and spitty, but still had a bit of bite to it. So I tried to bring the values closer together. But it was a hybrid as well, which is interesting. But I go the opposite way to you. So I'll have like maybe between 60 and 80 for Q1, ideally. I mean, I do go higher now and again. And then for Q2, I'll go higher to like maybe 120. Yeah, so and we got Justin in the thing there. He's actually saying 80 Q1, 120 Q2. That's on the electro smash circuit analysis. Mm-hmm. They talk about that. But I find that with Q1 you can actually go a lot lower than you think. As long as your HFE, as long as your leakage is lower than 100 micro. Is it micro amps?
Microamps, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's symbol or milli.
Yeah. Milliamps.
Yeah.
No, micro. I think it's micro because there's 0.1 milliamps in it. I hate math. If anyone has ever realized. So for my promotion, for my last promotion, not this one though, the previous one back in like 2016, I had to do an engineering degree. You're talking about a boy from Liverpool from a council estate that couldn't do the alphabet all the months of the year when I joined the Navy, and they made me do a degree. It was ridiculous. The first half an hour of maths, I was so far out my depth, it was horrible. But I managed to claw through all that, so don't be asking me about 0.1s and whatever. So anyway, so for Q2, do you have a specific HFE that you go for in Q2 or?
Like I said, it
or you
depends
mostly
on what I'm going for. Like if I'm doing germanium, I've found that you can go with lower HFE than's recommended if you bias it differently. And a lot of times I've gotten like really loud pedals out of things that you thought there was no way that this like 30 HFE reading is going to give me anything. But if you put it in the right place and you hit it with something that's like got a higher output, then it just adds like a really nice color, and your volume's coming from another component. So you're almost using it as a clipping section. So let's see. Let's see what I got in this one. Yeah, in this one I'm using a 142 for Q1, and in Q2 I'm probably using something like a 105. And now I'm also like, this is an NPN circuit, so it may bias differently in the PNP. So you might want to actually put them in the opposite order in a PNP circuit. That'd be interesting to explore. I've got a PNP breadboard that I can like put in and test side by side. I'm going to do that and just see.
Well, I just did one for a guy over in the States. I won't name names in case he doesn't want his name online, but it was the hardest Fuzz Face ever. Well, it was Abbey Road Fuzz as my version, but it was the hardest one I've ever built because he wanted like a biased knob, which I never really put in because I like the bias the way that I like the bias. I tend not to mess with it, but I put that in. And then he also wanted both positions, Q1 and Q2, to be switchable silicon and germanium. So biasing them in, that was a challenge because obviously you have to rebias for every position. So there's 4 different. That was fun, and it turns out in the end that it sounded amazing. if I do say so myself, a pretty big headed there. But he seemed to really like it.
It's
so
it's cool.
It's a balance
stuff
act.
like that, though. I mean, it's a challenge. You're like pushing the boundaries of what you've done before, and you learn new things every time you do that. It's why I like picking up a circuit that I've built, and just like looking at it again and say, what can I do different? Like, what haven't I tried in this? And sometimes it fails, and sometimes it works brilliant. So, it's the motto of just try stuff. I love that.
100%. If you don't try stuff, then you never know what you're going to do. Sometimes I've made mistakes. I've messed up the circuit. I've turned it on. It's like, whoa, why does this pedal sound better than the other 5 I've built? What's going on there? And then when I trace it back, I'm like, I meant to do that.
And the other thing that makes it hard to answer these questions about like what your favorite type of this is or what that is, because in the manufacturing process, especially with germanium, it was all over the map what you get. Like, so I've found things that, worked great, and the exact same thing that had the same reading worked horrible. It was the same component made by the same factory.
It's not linear, is it? Not at all.
It's so much, a variable, and that's why you just got to like get in there and try it and see what works, and see what you're going for. And people can 100%. Guide you in the direction. It's like, try this and it'll get you more in that direction. But there's no magic formula for this circuit, which is why we keep playing with it.
1,000 hours, 1,000 hours of trying something or doing something before you become proficient, and you'll get in here for, I can sometimes hear people say to me, I want the sound to be more brown, or I want the sound to be, blown out or whatever. And now I know exactly what I'm doing with the circuit. For example, you want it blown out and put more bass in the beginning.
The ultimate rabbit hole right there.
Yeah, exactly.
That little box is the ultimate rabbit hole, because it opens up like, oh, I can do this, and what if I add this, and what if I put this
with the Fuzz Face, because there's only a handful of components, each one makes it a massive change to the circuit. Sometimes with,
it does.
Like a tube screamer or whatever, you change one component in isolation. Are you really going to notice that? Probably not. Don't know. I think it's less pronounced. But you change something. I mean, for example, that output section here, that output cap C3. Do you change the value of that, because that can make a big difference to the circuit?
Yeah, I have, and I've actually done a mod where I put what used to be mounted where this third volume knob is now was a mini toggle switch. I will mount sockets on it. You can see there's sockets, and so I can just like put different capacitor values in and switch them back and forth. And I've got a little 20 picofarad capacitor jumping the legs, just to like keep it from popping, so that I can A/B it without hitting the pop. So
I quite like the pop. People hate it when you step on a pedal that pops out. It's like, I know I hit that switch then. Good.
It depends.
I actually sometimes jump the output cap from before R3 starts. So if you look at this drawing here, R3 is your supplying like voltage to the transistor. I will put the output cap going to straight there, joining straight to the transistor, and missing that resistor out, you get more gain. Or sometimes I'll switch in another cap on top of, so I'll have another 0.01 cap going from Q2 straight to the output pot. And I my last build video from last Friday, I did a Fuzz Face build, and I did that modification, and then the difference is pronounced. It's like palpable.
Oh yes,
it's more gain.
I watched that. Yeah, it was.
But also more noise. Different. So it's a trade off, isn't it?
Yeah, you always get more noise with more gain. That's just one of those things that in transistor circuits, it's something we have to deal with. If you want less noise, you start going and you start,
So that's another thing I was going to say. I find a lot of people who play with like maybe the Boss Katana or something like that will complain about certain things that I find good in my circuits, mainly because I like the interaction, and they'd be like, oh, it's a bit noisy when I do this, or it's inconsistent volume when I do this. I'm like, well, to me they're not good things. You're going into a crank valve amp or tube amp for you guys. That's great. You mean it's reactive to me? Brilliant. But some people really dislike that.
And again, like it's, everybody's got different tastes. I mean, we're not trying to do one thing for every single player, every single musician or listener. Like we're doing what we like. And if other people like it, that's great. I mean, that's the
exactly
way I look at it. I'm not trying to follow the herd. I'm trying to do what I like and what makes my synergies feel the best. I'm like, hey, that's what I want to do. So if you're on board, you're on board, man. So,
I would hate anyone being the same as me. It's a market nightmare for my pedals. I hate that. Do you know when I was like 17, 18 and I first went New Year in the UK. I don't know if it's the same for you guys. It's like the biggest night out in the year. It costs like 3 times as much for a drink. That sort of thing.
Yep.
And I remember going to So when I was like 17, I just joined the Navy and I went to this nightclub in Liverpool called the Grafton. It's a famous nightclub. It's famous because there's lots of old women and lots of young boys. I won't get into that, but anyway, it's why in the UK we call grab a granny type thing. And I remember going out that New Year and I was wearing it. Yeah. So I went in there and it was the time when I'm sure people over in the UK will remember back in like 2002 when it was like bell-bottom jeans and a suit jacket for a night out with a t-shirt. It was horrific. I'm glad there's no pictures. But I went out with this suit jacket on that was, I can only describe it as repugnant. It was horrible. And someone else had the same thing on, so I went home and got changed. I refuse to be the same as anyone. That's the way I am. So I'm the same with pedals and with guitars, and it's got to be your own thing. It has to be. So with regards to modifications, is there any that you like to do on this circuit that we haven't covered? I mean, I know you mentioned doing hybrid transistors. For people who are listening who are thinking, what is a hybrid transistor?
Well, the hybrid is when you're using a silicon and a germanium transistor in the same circuit. And I find that, placing the germanium in my NPN circuits in Q2 is where I want to put it. Now, I haven't done a hybrid circuit where it put a germanium in Q1 on an NPN. Like every time I've tried it, it sounds really farty. I don't know.
So that's the way that I go actually, and your transistor selection is important. Is way more important.
Yeah. Again, I'm thinking it might have something to do with like the different positive negative polarities.
Yeah, could
in
do.
the circuit because your voltages are flowing in a different path. So it could be that you're having to put those in the circuit differently. It's something I want to experiment with. I haven't really thought about that. I just found what worked for me. It's not something I've given a lot of thought to. So it's interesting that other people are doing it in reverse. And it's going to lead to a lot of hours of experimentation here in my laboratory. I guarantee it. Now that this question's come up for me.
Yeah. Well, now I'm thinking about it. If I'm ordering my pedals, I'll start with the highest gain first, and I'll go down to like my clean boost after that. So then I'm not like compressing everything. But when I'm building a Fuzz Face, I'll go with the lower gain first into the higher gain, and I'm wondering why. But there you go. There's going to be some experimentation on my part for sure. Yeah. And if anyone's wondering, the way that I do my circuits is on tagboard, and this is the this is the layout that I use. It's from Mark. I don't even know who his second name is, but this guy Mark has done pretty much every tagboard drawing I've ever started with before building my own form.
Yeah, I've got quite a few of his tagboard and Vero board layouts. He does really good.
He's
work.
prolific.
Yeah.
Prolific.
It could be Mark.
If anyone, I'm thinking maybe it is.
It might be.
Oh, it actually says on here Q1 HFE 80 Q2 120. So, but this is the PNP.
Yep. So again, like I said, that's something because I've been working with a harmonic percolator circuit, and so that's a hybrid of a hybrid. It's a PNP and an NPN silicon. So there you go.
That's
it's a double hybrid, and it is one of my favorite circuits. It's something that
I've never built one. Never even considered it. I need to do that.
I'm gonna have you join the dark side. We have cookies. So
Well, I'm putting on a bit of timber. I could do without the cookies, but
we have biscuits. I should have said we have biscuits. Uh, Another thing I forgot in when we were looking at the Q1 is that 33K resistor, dropping that down, like going with a
yep.
15K or even lower, and you get a lot more output out of the.
So I have a theory with, I mean, on this road in here, you can see the 33K and the 8.2K are the two bias resistors. I actually put 100K trim pots for both of them, and I just do it by ear.
Yep.
Yeah, no messing about, because each transistor is different. You want to make them work together, and what I find is you bias one, then you have to bias the other, and you have to go back to the first one, then the other, and it's like a balancing act. And you find, I'm pretty sure builders like Isletone or people of that ilk, like the higher end fuzz builders, will do that, and then they'll replace the resistors with actual, or maybe they have a set spec for their transistors and they stick strictly to the spec and use the same value, maybe.
Yeah, if you're good with like a nominal tolerance range or something of sound, like it's close enough. But if you really are trying to dial in specifics, you have to do it each individually. I mean,
I do it with an audio pro individually, so I know exactly what each transistor's doing. And also for me, the 470 ohm resistor from the negative 9 volt on this circuit, I changed that to a 1K because that boosts the output. So so when you step on a fuzz face, everyone's probably experienced this. It gets quieter. Like, who wants a fuzz that gets quieter? No one. No one wants a fuzz that gets quieter. That's a fact. So I put a 1K in there, sometimes 1.1 maybe, and that puts it above you. When you max everything out, it's like twice unity gain, and I'm guessing there.
And again, that's the nature of the germanium transistors that are being used. You're getting a lot like quieter output from germanium than you are from silicon. You hear that in clipping sections when you swap out clipping diodes. You can tell the difference in output between using the same voltage forward readings, for your silicon and your germanium. The germanium gives you a much lower output. So it's just
I normally end up stacking the germaniums together. So
I do too.
The expensive germaniums I have to put 3 in to get one way of clipping.
Yep, I know. Get it to add up.
Actually, the germaniums that I really like are the Russian ones for them. They're really well built, believe it or not. They're Soviet made. The copies are the D9E, I think they are.
Yeah.
I bought a bunch of them from Ukraine recently. My mate Paul put me onto this guy that was selling them, and the website looked a bit dodgy, but if Paul's ordered before, and it took like 3 months for them to turn up, it's ridiculous. But I thought, well, I've spent that money, whatever. But they'll actually all come through. I need to put another order in for them, actually. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, have you ever tried putting diodes in this circuit, to add clipping, or do you think there's enough gain?
Oh, yeah, no, you can, definitely. And that's one of the modifications that there's a really cool website called General Guitar Gadgets. JD Sleep has all kinds of kits. But he also has schematics, basically gives you all the information for a complete DIY if you want to burn the board yourself. You can, you can get the negative to make your own screen and then, burn your own circuit board. And
I think the first circuit board I tried to build, definitely destroyed, was from him, actually. I thought I'll try something simple and dive straight in for the delay, and I absolutely messed that thing up. There's just no way it was working. No chance.
But he's got a lot of the different mods listed there. But I've seen where you basically add them, into the output stage, just like you would on the Electra. And, it's just just a different contour that you can add into there. So
I love all that. Just something different, And of course, at what point is it not no longer the fuzz face in the German circuit?
You and I are psychic, because I was getting ready to say the same thing. At what point does it cease to become a fuzz face? Because this in this box is not a fuzz face. It's built on the topography of a fuzz face, It's got
Yeah.
two transistors, just like a Fuzz Face, but it's got a point 0047 cap right there for the output cap. So right there,
Oh wow, that is low.
Yeah, and then it's got a 1 microfarad electrolytic for the input cap. Then we got a 47 microfarad here electrolytic where the 22 would normally be. And then there's different R values, and of course I've got different bias controls. I'm using a 250K pot connected to what determined to be the lowest resistor value, where the 100K resistor goes off of the emitter.
Oh yeah.
And where that connecting resistor is to the fuzz. So I figured out what the lowest was there, made that my lowest resistance value, and hooked that up to a 250K pot, and gave me this huge range.
That's class.
All the way down to just it's not going to work anymore. It sounds like it's going to give up. To like, whoa.
If you sell enough of them, people always get in touch and say it's broke. You're like, no, you've just set it at an extreme.
Yep.
Have you ever seen? Oh God, what's the brand? There's a brand out in the US that do like the guys from the UK actually. I can't remember. My brain is failing me, but he does all like the underpants pedals and stuff like that. And he's saying that. You know what I'm on about now, and I feel embarrassed that I can't remember his name, because he's from Newcastle, which is like probably the most northern city that I can think of in the UK. But he always says, like, people say to him, "Oh, the pedal's broken." He's like, "No, it's meant to sound like that." So the next stage is going to be components that we look out for, ones that we revere. I mean, I mentioned like the Mulholland OC81Ds before. I mainly use them for Rangemasters, but Fuzz Face definitely. What are the standout components that you really look out for, that you think people should be? And obviously NKT 275s, people are going to want them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about ones that people don't know about.
Well, the sleeper, and you use them. I've seen you use them. A lot of people use these. Are these Soviet transistors?
Oh, come on.
And you can get them in civilian packaging and military spec packaging. They're just like the Soviet made diodes. They're ubiquitous. And the reason why is, while we were like in the solid state era with ICs and transistors, they didn't have access to that. That was like verboten for electronics companies, because they were all NATO allies, to sell that technology to the Soviets. So they were stuck with what they had with transistor, germanium technology and valve.
And they made them really well because for us, I mean, we moved on, and the stuff that was left over, or the stuff that carried on getting made, was the lower end stuff. But for them, they were still producing the high end stuff right into the 80s. I mean, some of the ones I've had are like 1987, and it's still fantastic. Well, same as the paper and oil caps.
Yeah, some of the factories enjoyed a resurgence because there was demand for it. So especially like with tubes, like I think the tube amp craze, like resurgence, once everybody realized that solid state wasn't where it was at for the sound they were looking for, they suddenly said, "Hey, I can't find tubes," and there were tube factories in the just now defunct Soviet Union that were like, "We have all these tubes." Like,
and what people don't realize as well is, I don't want to tell anyone, but the Ukraine wars actually put a stop to it, because they were all made in Ukraine. So all the stockpiles, a lot of it got moved to Bulgaria, but the stockpiles are just about gone now, because it was all made in Mariupol and places like that. So if you're thinking about stocking up on Soviet components, I highly advise that you do it now, and don't wait until all that mess is over with, because it'll be gone. There'll be none left, and we'll all be reminiscing about when we could get MP38As for next to no money.
What you'll be doing is like going through people's estate sales that have hoarded it from that point forward.
100%. I do that now. I like to go through eBay, look on eBay and look for someone who's selling their dad's garage TV repairman, and they're the ones, and they're like loads of old resistors and stuff, and then you see pictures of the drawers and they're everywhere. You just buy the lot, throw most of it away, and keep the good stuff.
Yep.
100%.
And you never know.
And if my wife was watching this, I definitely don't hoard all this in the spare room. Definitely not.
I would not look in that closet. There's nothing behind that door. Nothing to see here.
It's horrific.
I'm glad that I'm glad that the camera angle on my phone is not wider, because you'd see me surrounded by transistors, like all kinds of things. Like I've got like the contents of my house like slowly like piling up around me, and so yeah, it's a mess. And also my obsession with everything I'm building is like around me. So
well, I found over the years that you find something that's good. Maybe you buy lots of one or two here, one or two there. Find something that's good, and you go back and buy another 10. And then you go back and buy another 10. And then you go back and they're all gone. Because someone's done what I should have done in the first place and just bought the lot. So now I just buy everything all in one go. Oh, look, we found all of this. I mean, I think I was watching Marcus Reeves. He does like the Monday Minute. Don't know if you watched that, Reeves Electro. And he mentioned about these transistors he was buying. Schoolboy mistake, because he went to buy them and they were gone by the time he got there. Yeah, terrible.
I've had that experience before too. I know what you mean. Like I let somebody know about a deal and thinking that they were going to go get a few, and they went and bought the whole lot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I should not have shared that with you. I thought you were my friend.
So another one for me is NKT12 transistors. If anyone's got any that they want to sell or knows where some are, please then come my way. They generally, I genuinely, I've never had a bad one. Never. The NKT12. And then in the little round metal cases, and another one, NKT as well, 104. No one's ever heard of them. They look completely different. They're earlier than the NKT275s. They're like a pancakey flat thing. And they're from way back when. Some of them are even pen amended on them. What they are, they're not actually like printed or stamped. They're that old. But they were fantastic. It's maybe you get 50% of them testing the right range to be able to use, but that's actually quite good.
Yeah, now, I guess something that I probably should do a little more research on is like what the equivalents of those are that you would find in stuff over here, because I found a lot of things that are made by the Zenith Corporation. Like you were talking about the radios, is it the Rogers?
The Roberts
radio.
Yeah.
So Zenith made a lot of really high quality transistor radios that used PNP germanium transistors.
They look so Art Deco as well. They are, yeah. They're like so cool.
So people that are stateside, that would be something to look for in your thrift stores, your Goodwills, those places. Yeah. There's one model that I've got. It had 8 germanium transistors in it. Every one of them was like, I think they're OC series.
Yeah,
I believe.
So OC44 is sort of the NKT275, is it? Is that like the same sort of?
I think, yeah. I'd have to look at I've got like, man, I've got so many like hard copies of documentation for substitutions and equivalencies.
Yeah.
My dad was an electronics geek. He built the first television that we watched. It's actually right behind me. In this den,
class.
And so he went through a homeschool program from the Bell Howell Laboratories, the CREI Institute, just basically learned all this stuff on his own because he just liked to mess with it. Never sought it out as a career. He was a professional pilot, but this was his hobby, his avocation. And he said that if he ever did it for money, he would hate it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Especially amplifiers. I mean, I've had my foray into amplifiers, and you just don't make. You have to be one of the big builders. I do like Filmo sound conversions. I've got one upstairs actually that I sold, and then I got hold of the guy who I sold it to. He said, "No, I've sold it." Like, oh no, because I really wanted it back. I built it actually while I was at sea, and I was like, I built it at sea. A guy over in the UK who goes by the brand Noisy Hammer, he builds like custom guitar cabs with like live wood and stuff. It's fantastic. But he built me this tweed cab, and it was in like a Dumbly type shape. And I just, a 12-inch speaker as well. And I sold it on a whim because I needed the money or whatever. I didn't even need the money. I just wanted the money. And then I bought it back for £400 off the guy like 3 weeks ago. Off the guy who owned it eventually. And he come and dropped it off. And And I kept saying, I'm going to sell it. I said to the wife, I'm definitely selling it. Definitely selling it. And as it's been sat in my room more, it's like become more and more part of the furniture. Like, I'm definitely not selling it. But Bell and Howell Filmo sound amplifiers, like, come on. Yeah. There's no money in it, though. Not unless you've got a name, I suppose. Yeah.
So anyway, I guess what would we look for, like, as far as like in the silicon realm?
Wow.
Hybrids. Like, what do you like to use as your like silicon hybrid for the PNPs?
So, I really like the 183Ls, BC 183Ls from Texas Instruments.
Oh yeah, Texas Instruments makes really good.
Yeah, but also, if anyone's ever seen the spaceship looking size transistors with gold legs, there's a white band version called I'm going to butcher this. It's a SCIL 183. Now, I was saying that my military spec BC 183Ls, I had a bunch of them, and a guy got in touch and said, they're not military spec, mate. These are military spec here, and he showed me these things. And I was like, well, I pulled them out of a warship, so they definitely are, because they were fitted to the ship I was serving on. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. Because we used to, on the frigates I served on, or technically still serve, it's all 80s technology, 70s technology. So they're still using this sort of stuff. And it goes in the bin, or the trash for you guys, gets chucked out, and then I can bin dive and go and get them out, whatever. And I said, the military spec, and he said, don't worry, I'll send you it. And he sent me 2 over. Fantastic. Like, if I can ever find them, but all I can find is some odd pictures of them online. I can't find anywhere to buy them or more than that.
Military spec is a very broad term, because is it military spec for, navigation systems? Is it military spec for communication systems? Is it military spec for a weapon system? Is that a missile?
The stuff that I was using it for was actually a motor thermal protection unit for a vent fan.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go.
So
it's military spec for that application.
Usually, in being serving in the military, and I don't know if it's the same for you guys over there, but when we say military spec, we have this stuff come over labeled RN spec, boxes of meat, like frozen meat, so it'll be like beef or whatever. I say RN spec on the side. And what it usually means is they can't sell it to anyone else because it's so rubbish. It's like the floor sweepings.
Your thoughts are going to have to eat this.
This stuff could see they've got no other options. They'll eat it. Don't worry. Give it to them. And RN spec usually means bad.
Yeah, pretty much. Take comfort in the knowledge that your weapon system was manufactured by the lowest bidder.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so them CIL, CIL in capitals, 183s, and then like a spaceship type enclosure. I'm going to post a picture of them on Instagram. Yeah, they're really good. Yeah. I mean, and what about you? What do you look for?
Well, again, I look for things that are in a metal can. A lot of times, I like things with like the gold-plated legs, and the kind of things you would find in a military spec transistor. Texas Instruments, like they make really good stuff. It's hard to go wrong with them. Motorola components. I'm thinking of what I can find stateside. Because that's the thing that. You're going to find a wider selection of that kind of stuff here than you would find over there, and you're going to find a wider selection of what you guys had manufactured domestically there than we're going to find here. Because there's something interesting to note is the import and export of electronics, was not as wide open during the time when these things were made. Like
it's hard to imagine now, I know.
Because it was like military secrets. I have circuits that are marked top secret, do not share, classified. Because they came out of an aircraft. It came out of a box that came out of an aircraft, and at the time it was something that we didn't want falling into the enemy's hands. So you made it in house. It's like So
I actually think that time's coming back.
I
think slowly that 20 years time we'll be all thinking. Do you remember when you used to be able to get anything from anywhere?
Yeah,
I think it's all coming back home. Not in a good way either. I like being able to go to Bulgaria for my Soviet transistors.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I like having that global market, but I also like having the domestic manufacturing capability too. Just it's the best of both worlds.
I would do if I was American and I could manufacture all that too. But when you're stuck on a UK small island. That is.
Oh yeah.
There ain't that. I mean, I know we did have some,
You
but
know, we know better now the toxicity of the process to make some of these things too. So that's the other thing. Like
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
you
Well, that's
know,
why it's outsourced, isn't it?
yeah, where I'm selling my house in Asheville, there's a Superfund site that was where Sprague and CTS had a factory.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, the toxicity there. I mean, they basically like sold it to Walmart for $1, and Walmart did the environmental cleanup and built a super center on top of it. It was that bad.
Yeah.
Like the
So
government
over
didn't even
there,
want to touch it.
we had like Newmarket NKT were our like mass producer.
Yep.
Even though now they're like the most revered in the world, for whatever reason that is. I found a few good websites like tracing the history of certain transistor designs.
Well, the Philips.
I forget what it's
too.
called. Oh yeah, Mulholland Phillips.
Yeah, Mulholland
Yeah.
Phillips. Those are some of my favorites. Like when we were talking about favorite transistors, a lot of times I look for these mushroom cap transistors. You know, when I'm looking through old components.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, these are
So
some of my favorite.
the BC125 for NPN and BC126 for PNP silicons in that format, really good, and you can get them for pence.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and what
And,
you'll find,
and it tastes good.
what also something that's important to remember is you're going to find these components marked with what they call house markings a lot of times, because major manufacturers of electronics would order in bulk from somewhere like NKT or Philips their own spec, or whatever their model was, and it would be their component number written on there for their manufacturing line to know, okay, grab part number this and put it in slot here, because you have all these people in a line. So it's the revered component, but it doesn't say that it's the revered component on there. You have to know what you're.
Isn't that what happened with the Sprague Black Beauty and Bumblebee caps? The same caps.
The same caps, just
labeled differently for different.
Well, yeah. Well, it's because they transitioned from the color band marking system to the numerical system, and it's the same cap on the inside of that plastic housing. It just has a different outer housing. One shows you the value of the capacitor using your like international color band system. The other one just has it in numbers. It's the only difference.
Yeah.
It's still a paper and oil capacitor in foil.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. And then for me, pot wise, I tend to really like the Central Lab pots, but they're so expensive. And to put them in a pedal, I mean, I do have some old CTS ones for Rangemasters that are, like the nylon shaft CTS ones. They're really good. But what I find is a lot of people now go, oh, it's really like stiff to move, or it feels grainy or whatever, and they don't like the feel of it. Whereas the modern, like the Japanese built, them small little green compact pots, I get a lot of comments where people saying, oh, the pot's really smooth and it feels great. But actually, I prefer to have the CTS or the Central Lab in my personal pedals.
I like it. I like having the bigger resistance field, But it's also a feel thing. Like for me, it just feels like I like an alpha, like the 16 millimeter alpha pots.
I just don't like that the part where the pot's attached to it is so long, so you have to cut them down. I'm like, why? Why not just make it the normal size? It really bothers me.
Talking about
the spline. So over here, the alpha pots, they come 16. The larger. Oh no, I'm thinking 24 mil actually. So the larger base, but then that spline bit is really long. Like, what part are you making that for? It's ridiculous. And obviously they're making it to go through a radio body and come out the other side, aren't they? But
yeah, see that they make so many different ones. Do you ever shop with is it Newark Electronics?
No.
They're based out of the UK. They have
Newark.
Newark Electronics. Yeah, look up Newark Electronics. They also sell in the US, but I know that they're based out of the UK, and they have all the different shapes and sizes. They sell to people like us too. You don't have to be a major business, but they also sell to all your major manufacturers. Like you can order bulk. You can order 1,000 potentiometers from them and get the bulk discount. They've got knobs. They've got they've got transistors. You can find sometimes you'll find military spec stuff. Newark is a
Oh,
really good
cool.
source. Yeah, I highly
I'll be
recommend
checking
that
them
for
out.
DIY builders. And that'll solve a lot of your problems with like being able to find
Yeah.
potentiometers to fit the enclosures you want. And it opens up your experimentation because you like see it's like, hey, there's a little tiny push button momentary switch that I can mount here, and like you really
Yeah.
have like it's like DigiKey's another one, but Newark is a little more like small
I've,
builder
I,
friendly.
I've used DigiKey for amplifier transformers. They have a lot of Hammond transformers.
Yeah, but Newark is the one that I think is more small builder friendly, prototyper friendly. DigiKey,
So,
they're more like if you're a major
they're big.
manufacturer, they're
Yeah.
big. Yeah.
I use a lot of Switch Electronics as well in the UK. They're
Yep.
based up north somewhere. They're really good.
And then
What I like about them is you order something, it's there the next day.
there's the small guys like we're talking about stompboxparts.com. You've
Oh,
got
yeah, come on.
Five Cats in the UK.
Yeah. Oh, mate, what a guy. I've just done that mod kit on the Tremolo, Joyo Tremolo of his. Such a great mod. It's so easy to do and a great mod. And the PDF that come with it was a work of art. I was more amazed by the PDF than I was anything else. Like, I'm pretty sure people are sick of me talking about it.
But that's the thing too. Like, go out there and support some of these guys.
Yeah.
It might cost you a few pounds, a few dollars more, but in the long run, you're like helping keep this alive because they're looking for these components, and a lot of times they'll do all the work for you, and
you just got one spot to buy it from.
Yeah, Small Bear in the US is
so Small Bear they were the only place to buy components when I started in like 2008. It's like Small Bear was I was importing resistors and orange drop caps like for ridiculous amounts of money to get them sent over at that time. It was.
In the US, there was Antique Electronics Supply, Small Bear, who else? Mammoth.
Oh, Mammoth, yeah.
Yeah, and that's who StompboxParts.com grew out of. It's like, I think they bought all of Mammoth's inventory and...
Oh, Love My Switches. Love My Switches. I've had a few orders from them. You ever seen them?
I have seen them, yeah.
They have the most amazing range of foot switches that with a name like Love My Switches, you expect them to, right? But like just gold pin, not gold pin, 4-pole double throw, 3-pole. It's ridiculous. Yeah, there's loads.
That was the link that I got you to send me, right? Where I asked you where you got those gold pin foot switches, because.
Oh yeah. The ones that I found, they're super cheap. Well, yeah, and then lastly, just before we close out this podcast, because we've been going for an hour and a half now, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, we could go. We could do this.
I know.
Seriously,
I could keep going on another circuit.
And we can do this every Monday for the rest of our existence, I'm sure. So,
and
still not cover it all.
Yeah, exactly. And so just before we close out, I'd like to apologise for last week's, not last week, it was the week before, episode 1. Are we calling that episode 1? That abysmal train wreck? I'm not a train wreck in a good way, as in like the amplifier.
We could call it episode negative 0.15 or something.
Oh man, I just could not get. See, as soon as you mix my anything analog with digital, so my dad gave me this computer that I'm using now, and as soon as we added that into the mix, I couldn't use anything. So it just didn't go well. But anyway, on that one, I tried to explain the fact that I'm starting this podcast with a pickup builder over in the UK, Thomas Nilsson. He builds for Billy Gibbons, Slash. He used to be of Cream Tea fame. He's no longer with Cream Tea. And we were starting this together, and we were calling it Pedals and Pickups or something like that.
I remember,
Yeah, so there's some legal troubles going on there. And really, everyone wants the question answered is what went on. And he can't answer that because, well, legally, he's bound. So there's no way that I could be on a podcast where we couldn't be open about everything. So for me, anyone can ask me anything and I will just give you the answer. I mean, I talked about my Fuzz Face circuit, that Abbey Road Fuzz that I modified, made my own, that I sell. I give everyone the keys to the kingdom. On my last video, I really don't care. There's no,
we call a non-disclosure agreement, probably.
Yeah, there's lots to it. There's lots of blame going around, and I wouldn't want to be on one side of that or the other. I know people on both sides now. Like me and Thomas got on really well. We again, like this, we could talk for hours about components and anything to do with guitar. But I couldn't start a podcast or be regular where I couldn't answer everything. Someone writes in the comments, I need to be able to just go, well, I'll tell you the answer. People can ask me anything about being in the Navy, anything, doesn't matter. I'll answer it. And so that's why, for my own personal integrity, I couldn't do that. And then, thankfully, you stepped in, and from how this first one's gone, it seems like it's going to be a beautiful relationship.
It was a happy accident. I had just been like going through and like watching as many things on different videos on YouTube about pedal building and just seeing what people were doing. Because I'm kind of in a like rebuilding phase. I've got a whole story that would be like another podcast in itself that I can share eventually.
Maybe we should do that next.
Yeah, we'll
do that next, and then we'll move on to it.
You and I
to another circuit.
You and I can talk off camera and like see what we want to do. Things, because there's some things that like I think we probably could talk about that like are just fascinating that might not have anything to do with effects pedals, but are still fascinating. Just because, it shaped who we are. And you've got crazy. You got some crazy stories, mate. You really do. I've got some equally crazy ones, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's going to be a good.
The people that we've both met, the people that we know, it's like people always say you should write a book. It's like I'm too busy living the book.
Well, in the future, I've said this for years. I'm going to write a book called "Life in the Blue One: The World According to Joe." It's happening.
There you go, sir. There you go.
I've said it out loud now, so it has to happen. People in work laugh at me going, "You're not writing a book." Like, what's this space? So anyway, that brings us to the end of this podcast. I've been Hello Sailor Joe. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening to it now, the guys in the comments. Thanks for all your questions. And anyone who's listening to this in the future, please subscribe and look for us all on all your favorite streaming sites for podcasts, as well as YouTube for this live stream. And I'll leave it to you to close out, John.
All right. Well, it was great seeing you again, and great talking about this circuit. I feel like we only really can scratch the surface in like one of these. So we'll call this like part 1.5, maybe, of the Fuzz Face deep dive. But there's so many other things, and I've got like so many things I want to experiment with before we do the next one. So maybe I'll come back with some like new results and some new ideas. But I am in the process of moving, so I can't guarantee anything. But until next time, this has been John SpaceWolf Mulholland. Please like and subscribe. Support Sailor Joe. His stuff is amazing. Like everything that I've heard of his, and I've only heard recordings. I haven't heard it personally. I can imagine what it would be like to actually plug into one of those. So
cheers, mate. Much appreciated.
One day I will.
Tune in, people. 2 weeks time, every other Monday, 9:00 UK time, and we'll keep that going. And if we get lots of subscribers or we get people who are interested, and we find out we can afford the time, we'll start adding in more Mondays and go from there. Well, cheers.
All right, cheers.